All right, welcome fans to another edition of Ranking the Albums. And today, as you can see, we are ranking none other than Poison.
Poison.
And welcome and bringing in a special guest for this one. And there
How's
he
it going,
is, Mr.
guys?
Chris Kiebzak, Mr. Poison himself.
What's going on?
So that was a great idea. We decided to let's do some hair bands, and we're going to start off with Poison as our first choice here. None other than the glam slam metal guys themselves here. Um, so that we're ranking the six albums from their catalog, just the studio ones. We're not counting Poisoned, which was the covers album, or any live albums. So we're just going to stick with the traditional studio albums from 1986 all the way up until the final one with new material, which was Hollyweird back in 2002, 21 years ago.
Isn't that crazy to think about? How long ago it was since that record came out?
That is insane. I can't believe I remember that tour too, don't you?
Yeah, well, obviously that was the first new Poison record in my lifetime of being able to purchase the records. I mean, I was born in 88. I got into Poison around 1997. So besides Power to the People, which had great songs on it, but that's for a later discussion. But the Holly Weird was there was a lot around that, like them on Jay Leno and them Brett Michaels. This was obviously all before Rock of Love, so Brett Michaels doing guest spots on TV shows like Yes Dear and stuff. There was this whole like media thing around Holly Weird. So for me, I was really, really excited for it.
Yeah, that was one of those good tours they got back in '99 to get back out on the road with the original lineup, and pretty much right through till about 2008 or 9, they did a headlining run every year almost, with the exception of the Kiss tour back
Yeah.
in '04. So, all right, well, let's get going. We're going to go back and forth. We're going to start off with your number six. What do you got for the number six album?
All right, so I was honestly, it was hard for me for the number six and number five because it could have interchanged for me. But for my number six, I have Crack a Smile, which upon revisiting it last week, there's a couple songs on here I forgot how good they are. I think Sexual Thing is maybe one of probably the best song they released since Flesh and Blood at that point, for sure, in my opinion. I think that song sort of fits the mode of that old school Poison style. But a couple of the songs like Set You Free is a good song, I think. And yeah, Baby Gets Around a Bit's a good song.
Hmm.
But some of the stuff is just weird for me, like Mr. Smiley. It sounds way too blues oriented, you know what I mean? And I think that's sort of when the first 17 songs or whatever are all original, and then you're waiting to get to the live stuff at the end when it's that extra thing on the Crack a Smile and More. You know the originals aren't that great. But again, I think Sexual Thing is probably in my top 15 or 20 Poison songs for sure. But that record just it still doesn't feel like a Poison album. It felt like a Bret Michaels solo album to me every single time I've listened to it. So that's why Crack a Smile is my number six.
All right. I got a different one for my number six. I'm going to bring in none other than the 1993 release, Native Tongue, the other album that does not feature Mr. C.C. DeVille on it, and that has Richie Kotzen on it. Um, Very bland album. I just have to might say there. The only songs I really feel, obviously Stand was the hit, and that definitely is a standout on the album. And you could see, if you got to see the tour where they played Stand on it with CC on guitar, that was unique. They made the song faster and heavier, and it was so much better. It's just a shame they haven't really played it again since that tour. But Stand is definitely the highlight on the album. The only other songs I could listen to without cringing was Stay Alive and Until You Suffer Some Fire and Ice. I don't know. For some reason, this album just doesn't really do it for me, and that's why it's my number six.
Now, you seen that tour. Did that change anything for you as far as like the songs that were played? I mean, because they played a decent amount of the album.
Well,
Did
by the
those
time,
songs
yeah,
stand out more?
by the time they got over to Buffalo, they really weren't playing much on the new album.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so that
Okay.
was the first show ever at the New Darien Lake Amphitheater, believe it or not. And some people might remember that. But that was back way back in 1993 when Firehouse came in and opened the show there.
Yep.
All right, so let me check that out real quick. I just wanted to see some of those songs. Obviously, they played Stand, that was the hit.
Right. Well, when Poison did stand on that tour with CC, I think that these songs could have been given new life had they had picked one or two to mess with every other tour or something, and to really, like strike up the band or something to really make it more of their style of what the original Poison is compared to that record. But they never really did nothing else with it. And like you said, it was only for a tour the stand was played, I think.
Yeah, I believe it was only on the one tour, and that would have been back in 2003. So that was with the Skid Row and Vince Neil opening.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks like they played it in 2003. Yeah, and that was pretty much the area where they played it, and they didn't even play it like, for the whole tour. It looked like it was something that was kind of just added in there. You
Right.
know, yeah, weird. But yeah, I remember that tour well. That was definitely one of the 2003. So that would have been the fourth year that they were out there on the back on
Yeah.
the trail to they were coming every summer at that point.
Oh
So
yeah, that was the first time I was front row, I believe, was the 2003 show with Vince. And yeah, that was a great show and a great tour. I remember Skid Row really blowing the roof off the place to begin with. And I didn't expect that, to be honest with you, because I'd seen them previously and they definitely were on a whole new level on that amphitheater tour. So
yeah, I remember it was pouring at Darien.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, that's
remember
right.
that well. I was pouring, and they had everybody under the roof there for it. They didn't
Yeah.
allow anybody on the lawn because of the rain and everything. So
I remember I was in eighth grade and we had a field trip that day. And me and my buddy were going. And on the bus ride back, we were so excited, but it started downpouring. We were so worried that the show was going to get canceled. But that was a very, very fun. That may have been one of my favorite times seeing the band for sure.
all right, so let's see. That should take us to your number five. What do you got for that one?
So my number five is Native Tongue. And like I said, it was sort of at first it was interchangeable until I really revisited the records. Um, I do like Richie's playing a lot, but again, I think the music is sort of I mean, coming off every other record they put out, it's just not the same genre. And I think Native Tongue specifically, more so than Crack a Smile, was really trying to follow the grunge undertaking that was coming to its peak in 1993. It was, you know what I mean? It wasn't there yet, but it had been building for years this whole time to hit its peak. And every band, Kiss, Alice Cooper, all of my favorite bands try to capitalize on that. And I think it hurt the music for a lot of bands. And I feel, but Native Tongue has a couple. I think the song "Stay Alive." I don't know if you remember that song from Native Tongue. It's
Hmm.
very Aerosmith-like to me, and I thought that'd be a song that you actually mentioned,
Yep, it
because it
was.
really does come off like a '80s Aerosmith song to me.
I think the problem with the album too, since we're kind of like almost in agreement right next to each other right
Yeah,
off of it, it just
yeah,
doesn't have. Poison was always known for having this riff that brought you into the song, and then Brett singing. This one is definitely they're trying to change who they are, and they just don't have that catchy riff or the catchy song that they've always had for the first three albums, which they were known for.
yeah. Being a guitar player, I think a lot of it too that it would be hard for someone who doesn't play an instrument to see is the tone also really dictated. The tone of both blues and Richie both are completely different than CC. So what you're saying about the riff is absolutely true. The riff and the tone of the guitar, especially in those songs, is completely different. You know what I mean? And
Oh
that
yeah.
kind of style and stuff worked for bands like Great White and stuff. But Poison has always been keep it simple, stupid. You know, it's always been the 4/4, the good rock party songs, and that was definitely taken away with Native Tongue.
Oh
But
yeah.
it does have its moments. I think Stan's a great song. The first thing I thought about is what you already talked about when Stand was played at that Darien Lake show. It made me revisit the album immediately. It didn't change my opinion of the record. But Stan did become well, now I have a question for you because I was too young to see this, but was Stand a hit at all? Was it being played on regular radio in the Buffalo area?
Well, that was 93. It was definitely played on the radio because I know that I heard it in places. Now, which station would have been playing it? That's another thing entirely. I mean, it didn't make the top 40, but when it came out, it definitely got some airplay. And probably got played on some of the contemporary stations because they were playing a lot of the earlier Poison hits like Every Rose and Fallen Angel, Nothing But a Good Time. So you would hear that maybe in the beginning a little bit, but it was one of those ones where the album came out, it got some airplay, but that was the only song that really did, and then it quickly died basically,
Right.
and it stalled at number 50 on the charts. So there you have it right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so enough about Native Tongue. I think we touched the bases
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
one.
I think we got that album down.
All right, so my number 5 is what your number 6 was.
Yeah.
And that's
Got it.
Crack a Smile.
Okay.
So basically, we just switched the two of them around there. So yeah, so Crack a Smile. But there's a vast difference between. There's no way they would even come close. Native Tongue is dead, the last dead spot, no matter what. It wouldn't even. Crack a Smile doesn't even touch it, even though it's next to it. It's just that you got 5 other good albums, that separate off Native Tongue basically from me.
Right.
But like you mentioned, Baby Gets Around a Bit. That's a really great song. It would have been great to see him do some songs off this album.
Yeah.
Lay Your Body Down. That was another one that was on the greatest hits along with Sexual Thing. So those were the two that people knew about ahead of time when the greatest hits came out. Because Crack a Smile, if you remember, it was recorded like around 94, but it was never released until 2000.
Right.
So that was kind of like following the big return of them back to playing live every summer. That's when this album came out, and it didn't really do much on the charts as far as, but it helped get Poison back out there. So that was a good time to release Crack a Smile because it did reach number 131, which is better than not being charted at all. So that's not bad for an album that was recorded like 6 years prior during the middle of the grunge era, not too shabby. And Native Tongue, just we didn't touch on this, but believe it or not, it did go gold and it reached number 16. But that was more or less following the coattails of Flesh and Blood, although it was released like 3 years later.
Right.
All right, so Crack a Smile and More. As far as other songs that we met that the cover of the Rolling Stone. That's okay,
I've never been a fan of that cover, but I'm not a huge fan of that song to begin with. But
yeah, that's Doctor Hook's song. But other than that, No Ring, No Gets is another one that stands out for me. But the rest of the album's kind of like the song titles kind of dictate the way the album's going. Nothing
yeah.
as far as innovative song titles where it's gonna make you want to listen to the song. You hear the song titles, some of these ones like Tragically Unhip, and That's the Way I Like It, and you picture them and you go, they're probably duds, and they are.
Yeah, totally. I totally see that. I think a big reason why that album was able to gain a little bit of traction from the fans is because of the Ann Moore aspect, like we both mentioned earlier. The MTV Unplugged stuff. That for me as a 13-year-old that was into Poison, when that record came out and I seen it at Media Play, that's what sold me because I did like the two songs on the greatest hits, and that's why I wanted to get that record too. But after those two songs, there's nothing of note really.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that's where it stands down there at number five. So that takes us down into the number four. What do you got for that one?
All right, number four for me is Holly Weird. Um, again, 2002. I was born in '88, so that was like a big deal for me. All the press junkets and things they did for the record. I still have a bunch of favorite songs on the record that would probably be in my top 15 or 20 Poison songs. I think Shooting Star was a missed opportunity for the band. I think that song is right up there in their greatest hits. It's extremely melodic. It's a memorable song. Sometimes I don't listen to it for, 5, 6 years, and it'll just pop in my head when I wake up or I'm at work or something. It's a very, very memorable song, a nice riff. I think Emperor's New Clothes is a great sequel or whatever, second vocal track as far as Poison's concerned for CC. I think that song is right up there with I Hate Every Bone in Your Body. I know I seen that song once, Emperor's New Clothes. They must have played it on the Hollyweird tour with Winger and Faster Pussycat and Cinderella,
Yeah, they
correct?
they they did, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great song, as well as Living in the Now, another CC sang track. I like CC's voice and his vocal progression, but I'm not a huge fan of Samantha Seven or a lot of his other solo efforts were decent, but one or two decent songs here and there. But I think Living in the Now and Emperor's New Clothes very, very strong as part of the Poison catalog. Rockstar, which we heard a year prior at my first Poison show at the Glam Slam Metal Jam.
Mhm.
They played Rockstar before it was ever released. I believe they may have released it as a single on their website well before Holly Weird came out. That's why it's a bonus track on the record. Um, and I think Home was decent. Both Brett and CC's versions are funny and cool. Again, it was a 14-year-old listening to this record, so I'm sure it was a lot different for someone who grew up with Poison and is now listening to this record at 35 or 40 years old when it came out. But for me, I thought it was cheeky and weird, but I thought going on Poison and their cover songs is always a mystery to me. Why Squeezebox had to be the first single on a new Poison record is beyond me, but it seemed to have worked for them. So yeah, the Hollywood is at my number four. Great tour, good enough record, a reunion record, and it was cool for a 14-year-old kid.
Yep, it's also my number four, so I can just continue jumping off of you on this one. The strange thing was they actually opened up with Holly Weird on this tour for about the first hand, handful of dates.
Yeah,
And then for some reason they stopped and they kicked it right off the set completely. They wouldn't play it at all, which
yeah, I thought that was really weird because that didn't hit Buffalo.
yeah, no, not until later on. And the weird thing was the only two songs they kept in the set for that tour from that album were Emperor's New Clothes and because that basically CC, if you remember going back, I think it was on the Glam Some Metal Jam, he was playing "I Hate Every Bone in Your Body But Mine," and then so they gave him one song. So instead of playing that one during the Hollywood tour, he did go to the Emperor's New Clothes, and that was the only tour that he really ever played that on. And
Yeah.
like you said, Squeezebox, that's the only song they kept in the set. And I think it's the only one that's ever been played ever since down the road. That would be like the only song they might have snuck in here and there over the
I
last few.
don't even think they did. I think after that record and tour, I don't think they did sneak. I don't think they played that song ever again. And they were every show they were playing. Jay Leno and all those shows, they were playing that song Squeezebox, and it was weird that it just sort of disappeared after that release.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely one of those weird things. But jumping back what you said, obviously the title cut, the way that kicks off the album, that's what they did start the tour with. And then my guess is they didn't like the way it went over, so they had to jump back into Look What the Cat Dragged, and I'm pretty sure that's what they were doing on that tour,
Right. Yeah.
for the Hollywood tour. And it's just let's see, that would have been 2002, and
Well, weren't they either opening with or playing second Talk Dirty to Me on that tour? I believe that's the first tour where Talk Dirty to Me got moved up to the
yeah,
beginning of the set.
that was, yep, they played Talk Dirty to Me second. You're right, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was once again, yeah, yeah, yeah. It seemed like they started off. early in the tour playing 14 songs, and then he dropped it down by kicking Hollywood off and knocked it down to 13. So even as far as 2002, it seems like they started cutting down on the set list somewhat, which, over the course of time, at one point they were playing like 15, 16 songs, and then, it would fluctuate over the years. Some years it would be a little bit longer. In the Who, yeah, so the Who cover Squeeze Box, they played it in 2003 as well as 2002. So it did stay in another year, which is exactly what I thought. They
Oh,
put
so that was played at the Skid Row and Vince Neil tour too then. Okay, I didn't know
at
that.
least on some of the dates. I don't know if it
Okay.
happened on all of the dates.
Okay.
2003, June, July. It was sporadically mixed in. It wasn't like every single night. In June it was, and then in July and August they kind of played it here and there. So it was hit or miss if they played it at all. That would have been, yeah, because I remember the last show of the tour in 2003. Well, one of the I mean that was the weird one where in Detroit they played it twice on that tour. Once around Memorial Day, and then they came back and played it right around Labor Day, end of August, or right around Labor Day weekend. And going to Detroit the night before, one of their trailers got caught on fire while they're driving on the thruway, and it damaged a lot of equipment. So they had to like use a lot of bare bones. They borrowed equipment from Vince Neil and Skid Row get through the to get through the night, because that was the last night of the actual amphitheater tour there. And I remember me and Ray went down there and we filmed a lot of that stuff and interviewed a lot of people about the fire. So that was pretty cool. And I remember we used it for one of Ricky's. If you remember, he used to do like these diaries on the road.
Yeah, like the vlogs or whatever.
Yeah, I forgot exactly what it was called. It's been so long,
Yeah. Yeah, I remember
but it
that.
was that was a cool time. But then that was not as scary. I remember at the end of the show, they all came out. That was the only night of the tour where they did that. They all came out together, Vince Neil, and there's pictures with Vince and Johnny Solinger and Brett up there singing rock and roll all
Rock and
night.
roll.
So that basically sums up Hollyweird, you know. Um, Not much, definitely the best of the three albums that came out separated from the first three.
Definitely. 100%.
So let's take us down to our number three.
All right, so number three, and I always felt this way. Actually, I almost put Hollyweird above this record, but Open Up and Say Ah is my number three. Um, I think I've always thought it was sort of overrated as a for what it is as a full record, but upon revisiting the album in full this week, there's no denying that Love on the Rocks is maybe one of the best Poison songs of all time. I love that song. I think it's much stronger on Swallow This Live as a live song. I luckily got to see that song played live once, but I love that song. I think Back to the Rocking Horse is an underrated gem in the catalog as well. Though a little cheesy, but I do love that song. I think Good Love is great. And I always underappreciated Good Love until that first Bret Michaels solo tour where he played Good Love, and I fell in love with that song. So
I think
that's one of my favorite Poison songs.
I think if
That's
he
just
played Good Love today, I think people would keel over and have heart attacks knowing that he
or
played something rare like that.
oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man, you're
Mm.
right. Yeah, you're right. It's hard to believe he actually played that on his first solo tour back in 2003.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
It was very early in the set. I think it was right between a Poison song and a solo song from Songs of Life, and it went over really, really, really well. But other obviously Fallen Angel comes from that record, which may be a little overplayed for my ears now, but what a riff, and definitely my favorite Poison song for the first 5, 6 years I was listening to that band. Um, Look But You Can't Touch is a great song. Again, I prefer it on Swallow This Live, but the production on Open Up and Say Ah is part of the reason why it's under the other two in the catalog for me. But the songs that are on there are undeniable. I think Open Up and Say Ah is a great record. I think Talk Dirty to Me again, completely overrated for me, but I love that song when it comes on. You can't deny how good and party like that song is. So yeah, compared to the other two, it's number three, but it does have five or six songs that would be up in my top 10 or 15 Poison songs.
Yep. All right, so I'm throwing you a curveball with my number three. My number three is actually going to be Flesh and Blood. So
Wow.
1990. Um, yeah, I mean, Flesh and Blood has a lot of filler on it for my liking, compared to the other two albums that were, like you said, pretty much every song is pretty good on the rest of them. But this is a little bit of filler. I think it's just a little too long. Had they, it's 14 songs on Flesh and Blood. So had they cut off maybe two or three songs, you would have an amazing album. As it is, it's still a very good album. So regardless, they hit the nail on the head. And it's weird because the CD age didn't really start right around 1990 in full force, but yet they had 14 songs on it. It's kind of strange that they were looking into the future, I guess.
Well, the cassette was just a single cassette, though, right? Still,
Yeah,
so it was able to
yeah,
fit.
yeah, yeah. And they probably stopped. I don't know if I'm sure it was out on vinyl then, but
Oh yeah, I own a copy. It was definitely out.
yeah,
I'm looking at it right now. I definitely yeah,
yeah.
they released that on vinyl.
But
Probably the last album they did release on vinyl.
yeah, possibly. The way vinyl took a hit later on in the 90s. So Flesh and Blood, obviously, say one of the couple of standouts. I'll give you the Valley of the Lost Souls, and obviously, the hits. Some of the lesser known ones that you don't hear too often, unless you're listening to Hear Nation satellite radio. Let It Play, which is a song Poison did play a little bit in, think it was the early 2000s. They played it for a tour or two, and then they never played really Life Goes On though, ever since, just on the Flesh and Blood tour. But those are two solid songs, and of course the song that me and you were fortunate enough to see Pete and Chucky do during a sound check one time, but Brett and them have yet to ever play it live, and that's none other than the classic "Life Loves a Tragedy," which it's a tragedy that they never play that song because that's probably the best song on the album, bar none.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we've been over and over it, and the Ricky tells us that it's just a hard song to play live. And I said, well, you don't have to play it exactly like it is on record to have the fans just really appreciate it. I
Yeah,
mean,
you do like what you did with Stand.
yeah,
You just go and basically re materialize the song.
yeah, fit it so it fits into so it plays smoothly right into the set. That's
Mhm.
just one of those songs that never got airplay, obviously, but yet it's one of those songs when you hear it, it catches your attention. And that song should have been big. It should have been a lot bigger. I think the production on this album is really strong. It's probably the best produced and best sounding Poison album, and that would be none due to the fact that none other than Bruce Fairbairn was at the helm for that one. The
Mhm.
late Bruce Fairbairn, who produced obviously Bon Jovi and many many other bands,
Oh yeah.
Aerosmith, and down the line, he went and produced a lot of people.
Including the Kiss reunion album that in time we all found out wasn't really a reunion album, but Bruce produced that record as well, Psycho Circus.
So yeah, so Flesh and Blood, obviously, just some a little bit too much filler for my liking, but nonetheless a very very solid album. So that's my number three.
Cool.
And what do you got for number two?
All right, so and this is gonna shock you, but look what the cat dragged in as my number two. Um, I think by and large, one of the best hair metal albums from 86 to 93 for any band. I think Cat Dragged In is by far up there with um my favorite Kiss and AC/DC and Aerosmith records. I think that it's a very solid record. Cry Tough is a song that is completely underutilized by that band. Me and you were lucky enough to see them play it a few times. I believe you talked them into playing it a couple times. Um, Cry Tough's incredible. I Want Action, I think is a concert staple Again, I'd rather them take it out and play 20 other rarities, but I think I Want Action is one of the high points of a Poison show. And then my favorite songs on the record are the sort of unknowns. Want Some, Need Some. I think that hook in the chorus is what sold me as a 7 or 8 year old when I started listening to them. Um, it's more poppier, almost even Beatles-esque. I love that song, Want Some, Need Some. And Let Me Go to the Show is another song that I think that they should move to the top of the set and open the set with, and then go into Cat Dragged In. I think that song is Let Me Go to the Show is probably the most underrated Poison song in its catalog. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I
if
mean,
yeah, if you remember some of the early 2000 tours during the introduction before they went into Cat Dragon, they would actually play the beginning a little bit. Cece would play the riff to
yeah.
let me go to the show, and then they would kind of cut it off and then go right into Cat Dragon. Pretty.
Yeah, I mean the song that they ended up using besides that song is pretty much still to this day what they use, which is the beginning of Valley of Lost Souls from Flesh and Blood.
Hmm.
But I always thought Let Me Go to the Show. I remember yeah, they played it 2 or 3 times. They did that beginning and then it cuts out and they go right into Look What the Cat Dragged In. And every single time I seen them do that, the 2 or 3 times, I fake pretend that it's actually coming, but I know it's coming. It's going to be that end, and then Look What the Cat Dragged In is going to start. But yeah, great record for an album in 1986. I think it really shook things up. Um, and I mean, 8 out of the 10 songs are I'd pay $200 right now to go see that album play live in full. But it just barely if Flesh and Blood wasn't in Poison's catalog, Look What the Cat Dragged In would have been number 1 for me. But okay, go ahead.
All
You're
right.
number 2.
Yep. Got none other than Open Up and Say Ah. Um, yeah, I was kind of surprised that this one did beat Flesh and Blood. I was actually surprised because I was never, I mean, I like to open up and say ah, but I was never really a diehard open up and say ah kind of person, especially when you go to the dentist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But getting back to their album there, you know, a lot of these songs are overplayed and overdone. You've heard them a million times, but let's be truthful. Has there ever been a song as lame, overplayed, and you just want to choke somebody if you heard it for the 300,000th time of Your Mama Don't Fucking Dance?
Yeah, you hate that song.
I
And so
just
do
hate that song.
yeah. And Brett feels he still has to play it at every show, whether it's Poison or solo. He has to play that song for some reason. Has to.
Yeah, I don't get it. I really don't. Not when you got a catalog of songs that you figure even he would get sick of playing it time after time because he didn't
Oh
even
yeah.
write it. You know, I
Yeah.
can understand if he wrote it,
Yeah.
like he's got to play every rose every night. If he ever forgets to play that one, they'll probably lynch him or something.
Yeah. I mean, he did it with Something to Believe in on 1 or 2 tours. You remember that?
Oh
He
yeah,
took
yeah.
that,
There was
which
times
is
usually
weird.
when they opened, because when they open they
Yeah.
don't get as much time. Like on those Def Leppard tours when Leppard was headlining,
Yeah.
they had to cut it out because it was a longer song, and unfortunately, they had a even on the stadium tour they were only playing I think 8 songs at tops at most.
I'm fine
So
with them cutting a ballad. You know how I am with ballads. I'm fine with them cutting a ballad.
yeah. So, the songs that I like are, like you mentioned, Love on the Rocks is a great song. That's a great opener too. Yeah, I think you can open with that one and your place would go
Definitely.
nuts.
Yeah.
Um, Look but Can't Touch. I've seen that one live a few times early on. But Fallen Angel, I was really surprised when they took that out, even out of Brett's solo set. That's the song that I don't know why. For some reason, he just doesn't play it solo anymore, and even Poison doesn't. They've been mixing it in not as often as they used to. But yeah, if they can get rid of Your Mama Don't Dance, that would make my life a lot better. If I ever, please, for my sanity, don't play that song anymore, please. And I'm not the only one who feels that way.
No,
There's
I do
so
too.
many, and the worst make it worse on the stadium tour. They actually extended the song to make it even longer.
And I could understand why they recorded it. I can understand why they played it, but now in 2023, nobody knows that original song.
Right.
No, none of these young kids that are going with their parents to shows, or these teenagers, or even 25-year-olds know the original "Your Mama Don't Dance." So I think it's sort of pointless. Besides the live stuff, I don't feel they really did anything. That song really that big for Poison?
Well,
Besides playing it live every single show?
it was only because I was surprised because I didn't even know this, at the time. I wasn't really paying much attention to it because the album, when it came out, it had a lot of legs on it with Every Rose and Nothing But a Good Time. So this album had a lot of hits off of it, big time. And oddly enough, it only reached number two. So that and Flesh and Blood are their two highest charting albums, but they only peaked at number two. But obviously, Open Up and Say Ah is their biggest seller at 5 times platinum. Flesh and Blood and the Cat Dragged In are only 3 times. So, but and so here's the thing with the singles. Obviously, Every Rose, their only number one song, and Your Mama Don't Dance, for some odd reason, actually made the top 10. It was
Wow.
the fourth and final single released off of Open Up and Say Ah, and it peaked at number 10. And oddly enough, Every Rose wasn't even the first single released. It wasn't the second released. It was the
What
third.
what was the first release single then?
Nothing But a Good Time,
Nothing But a
which
Good
peaked at
Time, yeah.
number 6. And then Fallen Angel was the second one, if you remember the video, and that
Oh,
peaked
yeah.
only at number 12. So you got three top tens off this album.
Hmm,
Pretty impressive.
that is
Pretty
impressive.
impressive. When you look back on the catalog of Poison, people always seem to kind of give it a bad name. Oh, it's Poison. Well, what do you mean it's Poison? Listen to this. You got one, two, three, four, five, six. You got six top 10 songs in their whole catalog. That's impressive to me. And then you throw in like another 5, 6 songs in the top 40 to go along with those, and you got a nice catalog here. It's just a shame that they really don't um, even play some of their hits in concert anymore. Which is kind of sad. You
Yeah.
know, it's really sad actually. But so that
I don't
that
know, I think the hits are sort of covered. Besides that they have to cut something like Something to Believe In or something, but as far as I'm concerned, their entire set list is hits.
Yeah, well, Something to Believe In only reached number 4 only, and yet they cut it out, which is weird because that's one of their most memorable songs that they have out there. Um, but I got more to discuss once we get into my number one. So why don't we get your number one out of the way here and get that
Yep.
drum roll going? Number one.
So my number one is Flesh and Blood. Even I mean, cranking out 14 songs, it's a lot. That's a lot of songs on a record. But there's to me there's no filler. But again, I was a 8-year-old boy trying to go through Poison. I think it's something has to be said about the way that someone young listens to an album or a discography after the band had already hit their heyday. I got to listen to their discography however I wanted. I wasn't going off what was popular. I wasn't going off of, oh, well, this is the single. I heard that first. I had to go and search all this stuff out. And what I found was the best production and the best songwriting and the most songs to get on a record was Flesh and Blood. And to me, you mentioned this before, but Life Loves a Tragedy by far, I think, is their golden mistake. They should have released that song on something, a movie soundtrack. They should have released it as a single. I'm not a big ballad guy, but that's how you do an in between song. To me, that's like half ballad and half rocker. A lot of that has to do with what it's about. Um, but I think that song really, if they would have continued writing like that with CC, I think we would have got a lot more than 3 great records out of that band. Um, don't even some of the filler, like there is some filler. Don't Give Up an Inch is a little bit filler, but I love that song. Come Hell or High Water, I love that song.
Mhm.
Um, Ride the Wind, I think is probably the best thing we get out of a Poison set list these days, in my opinion. That song still rips to me. Um, what else is on there? Let It Play's on there. You mentioned Life Goes On. I think that's another one that was a missed opportunity for them. Um, but for an album that was 3rd in their discography, in the matter of what? So you had 86, 88, and then 90 were when those 3 albums were released. I think Flesh and Blood has the least filler, on that record. The only reason I think some people think there it has a lot of filler is because there are 14 songs on it. And if you look at Cat Dragged In, that was 10 songs. Open Up and Say I was 10 songs. Holly Weird was 13. Native Tongue was 15. And Crack a Smile was probably around 14 or 15, right? I didn't get a number down for that, but
Well, it's 12 on the original recording, and then they threw those outtakes and that one demo on there.
okay.
So we didn't count them, so that's why I knocked it down to 12. But
Yeah, I just think Flesh and Blood has what the other albums don't. I think it has more songs, which sometimes can add to more filler, but I don't see it in this record when I listen to it. It's one of the very few records today out of any band that I can listen to front to back without skipping anything. So
hmm,
that's why Flesh and Blood would be my number one.
all right. All right, so that's going to take me to my number one, which is going to be the very first Poison album I ever saw, the first Poison album I ever heard, and the first Poison tour I ever seen. Look What the Cat Dragged In, way back to 1986. So I remember going into this store we used to have out by us called Hill's Department Store.
Yep.
And I remember going in the cassette section. I would just look around and browse, and all of a sudden I saw this CD cover with these guys on the cover that looked like women. They had mascara, makeup, and all this stuff. I'm going, and it says Poison. I'm going, what the hell is this? And at that point, I hadn't heard of them. So I said, hmm. So I took it home and bought it. I bought it and brought it home and put it on, and fell in love with it from the very first song, which is none other than Cry Tough.
Yep.
Goes right into I Want Action, and then it goes into another missed opportunity, the awesome I Won't Forget You, which is a
Yeah.
big Poison song that this band seems to forget they wrote it. Peaked at number 13 on the chart, so it's not no, song that barely cracked the top 40. But for some reason, they even ignore this one to this day. I'm really surprised. Even I'm surprised that Brett doesn't play it because he
Yeah.
doesn't really play a lot of ballads in his set, except for sure he'll usually do Every Rose. But you could this song was always put in at the beginning of a concert. First 3 songs you would see it usually it's number 3 or 4 on the set. So I
Right.
really don't know why that's one of those songs that you figure they would go on and play, the rest of their career. I mean, I'm kind of glad they didn't because then at least it doesn't get overplayed. But it's to the point now where at least play it. You haven't played it in like 10 years for Pete's sakes.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Something
makes
like
sense.
that.
Especially when they can't be not hearing that their set lists are lame and overplayed. They cannot be not hearing that. Who's hiding that from them?
Well,
So
not me and Ray. We mentioned it to him all the time. We always grab Ricky's ear, but
yeah,
obviously it's a band decision. I remember I went to go see Poison at Cleveland the one time, and I drove down with the guys from Evic. We all took separate vehicles, drove down there, and everybody got there at different times because we were coming from like Ohio. And I remember going to the back gate to drive back there, and I remember there was this guy on a bicycle, and I wasn't paying no attention to him because he just looked like didn't even recognize him. And the lady at the gate, there was a guard there at the gate, and I was explaining to her, that I was supposed to meet these guys here, and all of a sudden the guy on the bike says, "Oh, this guy's trouble. Don't let him in." And I looked over finally and actually looked at him, and it's Brett Michaels. I couldn't believe it.
on a bicycle.
On a bicycle. It's so
Huh.
weird. Yeah, he was just driving around in the back lot and stuff. But the funny part is that so we get inside and they hadn't done sound check yet. So we get in there and then we go in the front of the venue while they're on the stage getting their sound check ready. And I remember the production guy blew up because um, they were gonna do a quick sound check that was supposed to be like maybe a 10-minute sound check, which turned into like a 30-minute sound check that kind of pushed the production managers time frames behind. So, I remember him looking at Pete Epic and goes, "Every time you come here, you cause me problems." So for some reason, um, Pete was involved with this whole process. I don't know if he knew they were going to do it or what, but he never did spill the beans on that to me if he actually was the one. But anyhow, they so the all tour. This was like maybe a third of the way into the tour, and all of a sudden, this was 2006, and they're up there sound checking, and they break into "Cry Tough," which they hadn't played all tour, and probably I think it was maybe like the last time they played it was like 3 tours ago. So it's been a while, 3, 4 years, and they started playing it. And I remember they were going through it, and then the second then Brett wanted to go through it one more time, but he wanted it to go a little bit faster because they paced it up, made it go faster to kind of give it a little bit more balls to it, I guess. And so they played it a second time, and then sure enough, that night they debuted it, and Brett made the big announcement. Well, you asked for this song, and you wanted it back in the set, and here it is. Cry
And it,
Tough. And man,
and
that
it was and
place,
it wasn't Ride the Wind. That's weird.
yeah, and that place went nuts, man. And that was amazing to be a part of that, being able to see the sound check where they did it. They did it. I didn't know they were going to do it at night. We just knew they were going to play it at sound check. Because they weren't sure if they were going to put it in that night or maybe a couple nights down the road or whatever the case may be. But sure
Right.
enough, they put it in the set list, and it stayed in there because Darien was after that. So you guys got to see it at Darien as well. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Just a lot of great stories with this band. There's a lot, and these guys are true. They're really good guys. They're true professionals. But they need a hand at. So, I was gonna say if I can offer my services as a set list writer, I can make these guys the greatest thing since sliced bread if they
You've
took my
been
cue.
you've been vying for that position since I've known you, so and it's been a long, long time. I think I met you in 2006. So
Three. It was Brett's first solo
oh yeah,
tour.
three no, it wasn't. I
No,
interviewed him the next time he came through. I
four.
never met
2004.
it
Okay.
was okay, it was 2000, correct, because I interviewed him uh a couple months after the Kiss tour.
Okay.
And we met. I was back there to meet him. Big John got me uh, backstage passes or whatever. I was able to go to the sound check and stuff. And that's how I met. That's how me and you met, was that day there.
Yeah, but I mean, these guys are, just phenomenal. This first album, Look What the Cat Dragged In, it set the whole tone, for their career. Play Dirty, Want Some, Need Some, Blame It on You. Just some great stuff. I would say the weakest track on the album, which isn't a bad song, but probably number one Bad Boy for me is like the weakest song on the album. But the rest of it,
Yeah.
all solid all the way through. And what albums can you kick off with Cry Tough, I Want Action, I Won't Forget You? I mean, and then even the fifth song, Look at the Cat Dragged In, Talk Dirty to Me is the sixth song. I mean, what a way to kick off a career in an album. That's just great sequencing on whoever was involved in that. Obviously, this album was actually produced by Rick Browd, who was like the only album that he ever produced for Poison was that one right there.
Yeah.
So but that is yeah, definitely an interesting catalog, a well-loved catalog. Most people are very familiar with the first three albums and maybe not so familiar with the last three albums, but
Well, it does take a drastic dip, not to mention, I mean, you're talking about the first three, one in 86, one in 88, one in 90. Then it drops off for 3 years and you get Native Tongue, which is a complete departure.
yeah.
And then after that, you have Crack a Smile, which again, I mean, besides the extra stuff, it really didn't really move the needle. And then Hollyweird came out. So their catalog is interesting because really it's surviving on those first three albums that were, you know, that were in a very short period of time, in a 4 year period of time.
Yeah, so they went from opening for Rat in on the Cat Dragged In tour. They were the opener. And then who would have thought back in 1999 when Poison went back out on the road after 6 years absence, they were headlining. Rat was underneath them, Great White and L.A. Guns with Jizzy Pearl singing at that time. So that was the tour for the reunion, the first reunion back in '99 that kind of got the whole ball of wax rolling there. Um, yeah, just very very unique. And then they kept it up. Then they they were on the road for up to 2003 headlining, and then in '04, like you mentioned, they opened for Kiss with ZO2. And from there, '05, I believe, was trying to think how they were.
Oh five would have been, I don't think there was an oh 05.
Yeah,
Was
that's when
there?
they took a year off, I think. So then it was from there it was '06, which would have been, yeah. Yeah, so
And oh 06 was that Rat or was that that was
'06 was
2007?
Cinderella and End Ever After, I think.
Oh yeah, true. Yes, I was at that show with Darian. Yep. And then the next tour would have been with Rat, where we went to
Yep,
Darian in Syracuse.
yep, Rat. And then Veins of Jenna.
Yes, who I
Yep.
really liked. I really, really liked that band.
And then they did a tour, shorter tour. It wasn't as long the next year with Dokken and Sebastian Bach, which would have loved to seen more dates on that one. That was I think the only time I was able to see that one was in I think that was in Cleveland. And then obviously in 2010, Brett went out on the road with Leonard Skinner and 38 Special.
What year was it where we went to Cleveland at that Nautica Pavilion and we seen them with Warrant?
Yeah, that was 11.
Okay.
That was a year they came with Motley Crue and New York Dolls. So
Right.
it was the same tour, but they were just doing whenever there was a off date, they booked and they did the Cleveland show because that tour didn't hit Cleveland.
Yeah. Right. Because I started seeing the band in 2001 at the Glam Slam Metal Jam, which still is one of my favorite shows I've ever seen. And I dropped off probably around right after that Rat tour. I sort of stopped making it a priority to go to those shows because the set list never changed. And then they
And then
started doing co-headlining bills, and it became way too expensive to see a 12-song set list or a 10-song set list at that point.
yeah, because they were opening for Def Leppard.
Yeah. Which the Leopard tour was cool. Who was what Cheap Trick was supposed to open that at Darien and they dropped or they got something happened. Do you remember that?
They got tied up in New York City and they couldn't fly out in time.
Right.
So
Yeah,
we
that's
got
right.
we got screwed and they didn't even really do anything extra for that show. You figure
No, nothing
worst
at
case
all.
scenario, you would have played an extra song or two each band or something, and they didn't. All right. So do we got any more you want to add before we call it a day on the Poison ranking the albums catalog here?
No, not really, other than I wish we had a few more albums out of them. I feel this is a very small catalog, especially for hair band genres. I mean, a lot of these bands went through recording 1 to 2 albums every 3 or 4 years. Poison never really did that. It sort of came out of nowhere. Obviously, with Native Tongue and Crack a Smile, both of those were departures from what they were with CC. Like I said, they sort of got that boost again with Hollyweird, and I would have liked to see them record some more records or maybe release some more songs like they did with Rockstar. But all we got was another covers album and a couple live records. So I wish their catalog was a little bit bigger. But other than that, I think it's a very, very solid those first three, and I'll even add Hollyweird. I mean, the big four that me and you had, I think um is a great discography to have, and they should be proud of it.
Yep, I agree. All right. Well, it was good having you on. So we're gonna pick this up again probably in another episode down the road. I'd say the next group we're gonna do it'll be stay tuned for it. You heard it here first. The ranking of Twisted Sister.
That'll work.
That is going to be a great one to do as well. So Make sure you guys subscribe, please. If you haven't already, tell your friends, share the link, and check out the website for any other things going on there. We got tons of reviews about all these bands and all the shows that we've seen. And a matter of fact, just to let you know, Chris is actually the one that kind of pushed me into starting this website up back many, what was that, about 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
easily.
yeah, because that was we're the ones that started everything back up with it after initially I used to run a different website and I kind of retired for about 8 years. And then Chris was the one that convinced me we got to get back into this here. And yeah, it was a good call on his part because I don't think I would have done it without him pushing me and urging me to start up the website. So we came up with the name, and the rest is history here. But definitely, it's been great having you on as a guest. So
Nice to be
we'll look
here.
forward to many more these rankings down the road here. So good seeing you again, and we'll see you soon for the Twisted Sister one.
Sounds good. Have a good holiday.
You too.